everyone. I'm Rabbi Jill Hammer, and we're here in the Mystics Room. Today, we have the great privilege of learning from Dr. Joy Ladin, who is a dear friend, as well as the author of Shekhinah Speaks, a book of poetry about the divine presence published in 2022. And although that's going to be the majority of our topic today, Layton has published 9 books of poetry, as well as a memoir, and other books as well. Also has 2 books, a book of poetry called Family, and a book of essays on how gender is changing called Once Out of Nature, and those are coming out next year. So Joy's literary abundance is really quite extraordinary. And Joy has a very unique perspective on Shekhinah and how that term personality has been carried through, through Jewish tradition to our time. So, Joy, I'm very, very happy to have you here.
I'm delighted to be here, Jill, and you are somebody that I never feel prolific when I'm talking with because um, your books seem to uh, grow out of one another constantly and wondrously. But it's so fabulous to get to talk about the Shekhinah with you.
Mm-hmm. So you and I have had several conversations about how you have been talking to God and about God since you were young. And as we're sort of feeling our way into this conversation about your really amazing book. I mean, I really love Shekhinah Speaks because the voice is so direct and intimate and also eerie. There's something very transpersonal about it at the same time as it's very intimate. And so I wonder if you might say a little bit about when you first met the Shekhinah, however you would want to answer that question. And what was that meeting like?
Well, there isn't. Maybe this is a very Shekhinah thing. There's a way in which the Shekhinah is outside of narrative because, you know, being always there, we think about stories, they're events, right? When did you meet the Shekhinah? What did you say? We tell stories about how events are different from one another and grow out of one another. And the Shekhinah is it's more like moments of awareness of somebody who's always been there. So as you said, I have had a sense of God's presence. I was very lucky to have this. I certainly didn't earn it, but from very early childhood. And because of the isolation that I grew up in, because of being trans, I didn't have other people that I could talk to who actually knew who I really was, who knew what I meant when I said I. So I did a lot of talking to God, and I had as I grew up, I think this unearned sense of connection with divinity. I mean, I think everybody is entitled should have this. I don't think it's, but I also know that a lot of people work very hard for it, and I just want to make it clear that not because I was particularly good, not certainly not because I was learned. It was just something that I was able to have. Um, so that kind of became a certain smug sense of, God and I are the two outsiders in, we're the ones who don't fit into human categories. Like when Emily Dickinson says, I'm nobody, who are you? Are you nobody too? And then by the end of the poem, it's clear that all the cool kids are identify as nobody. That was the way I felt about my relationship to God. As far as other people, we were nobody, but we were actually the center of our own thing. So there's, it was an adult metastasis of a child's deeply necessary relationship, became a kind of idolatry because it kept serving my needs. There was a way in which the actual presence of God, I wouldn't acknowledge any aspect of that presence that didn't fit into my ability to feel like, oh, God and I we're sharing this outsider situation. So it kind of hardened into a form of idolatry, which I really did not um, reckon with until I was writing The Soul of the Stranger, my book of trans theology, which starts from that childhood sense and keeps going back to it. And but because it was a book and I was thinking this through, I started to see the limitations of it. And I started to realize, and this was one of the gifts of that book for me, was the more rigorously I recognized God's incomprehensibility and beyondness, including from my sense of, oh, God and I, we're just like this, hanging out outside human categories, the less outside of human categories I felt. I was like, yeah, God is really different. God is absolutely different from humanity, and no human being is particularly different. When you're standing next to God, let's put it that way, everybody else looks quite similar by comparison, and God looks very different. And this is, I think, you can tell your religious community is really making a place for God to dwell in when that's the sense that people have, that it's like, you know, we're just all human here with our needs and joys and hungers and satisfactions, and we're all surrounding this one who is, you know, from whom we came, but who is far beyond any of that. So, like, to the extent that religious communities have a sense of who's us and who's not us and that kind of stuff, which I think all human communities have, it's very hard to not have that. That's a way in which we're not really making enough of a place for the presence and the reality of God. But I didn't come to this through community. I came to this through writing this book. So I get to the end of the book and I'm like, I've realized that I've been an inadvertent idolater, right? I didn't set out to do this, but I realized that any concept of God that is comfortable, that perfectly fits our needs, that's what idolatry is. And um, so ironically, and I would say because the divine likes a good joke at our expense, this was a very good joke. I don't begrudge this joke. So right after finishing this book and having this realizations and everything, um, I get an invitation in between projects. I get an invitation as maybe I was finishing up the book to uh, contribute to read poetry at a Shekhinah event um, in Colorado, and I had some poems. I didn't encounter the Shekhinah, but I came across references to the Shekhinah when I was a child in Jewish texts, and I really liked the the idea that there was somebody who was recognized as female despite not having a body, not having a female body, not being socialized female. No one in Jewish tradition seemed to turn around to say that Shekhinah, you're not really female. You know, how gauche would that be? So to me, the Shekhinah became a coded way in poetry that I could write about trans identity. And the Shekhinah's great attribute in tradition is her presence. You can't get rid of her. It doesn't matter what catastrophes happen or even how happy we are. You know how, like, with the foxhole relation to God, like, oh, I'm about to die. You feel very close to God, and then, oh, I'm saved, and you forget God, right? Um, Many texts warn about this, but the Shekhinah is there with our joys, and she's there in the midst of our destruction. She was there on October 7th, and she's been there in Gaza, right? She just she doesn't leave. That's her. And that was the way I experienced my own female gender identification. That no matter how awful it was to feel this way, um, it was never, no matter what the incentives to turn away from it, it just was always there. And it was this light thing. So I used the Shekhinah as a metaphor and as a symbol. And I was quite happy to do that because the God that I was palling around with, we were bonding, or I was bonding, on the basis that we didn't fit binary gender categories. So I didn't really have an interest in thinking of God as female any more than I had an interest in thinking of God as male. Both of them just seemed like, well, things that weren't true to my experience of God, but also I think that neither of them were ways that it would have met my needs for relationship with God, for a feeling of closeness as I understood them because of my problematic relation to binary gender. So so I get this invitation and I dig up the old Shekhinah poems I wrote. It's okay, but maybe it'd be fun to write some new ones. So I wrote poems in the voice of the Shekhinah. They were persona poems. I was pretending to be the Shekhinah. And I was marvelously pleased with them. And I read them and other people liked them. And afterward I thought, wow, it's really easy to write these poems. Maybe I should just write a whole book of them because I'm always looking for the easy way, you know. And I went back to them and suddenly saw them in light of the work I'd done in The Soul of the Stranger. And I thought, oh, wow, I've achieved idolatry in poetry, which in our culture is pretty hard to do because nobody looks to poetry for ideas of divinity anymore. But here I was dressing up as, you know, the Shekhinah, and I had a little Shekhinah puppet, and the Shekhinah would say whatever I wanted her to say and do whatever I wanted her to do, and it made me feel larger. I had diminished God to a size that made me feel larger. So I would say the beginning of my encounter with the Shekhinah was this shame, and it was shame mixed with this, oh crap, I guess I'm not writing that book after all, kind of feeling. Tried to I tried to put her away. And then I would say I met the Shekhinah because I couldn't. I couldn't do that because something in me, and it shocked me, just wanted to hear her voice.
Mm, mm, mm. I'm really moved by that sort of intrinsic attraction. Just wanting to be with with the Shekhinah. I realize that I should say for our viewers a sentence about the Shekhinah kind of in context, which is that this is a word that appears in rabbinic literature and means the indwelling, and it in many contexts refers to the aspect of God that is tangibly present, right, in a particular place or at a particular moment. And then the Kabbalah later develops this aspect into a sort of full-fledged female persona. It's a feminine word, who's clearly part of God, but also clearly in relationship to God in various ways, as a beloved or lover, as a and often as a portal or a um, almost like an airlock between the transcendent divine and the physical world, right? That she in some way allows for that contact to occur. She's a mediatrix, right? To use a kind of fancy Catholic word, of divine presence, right? To the to embodied beings. Um, and one thing that I'm listening for as I'm listening to you, Joy, talk about, your experience of encountering this particular aspect of the divine, and it partly because the being gendered female, right, is interesting, right, is rare in Jewish tradition. And also because I think of the embodied piece, right?
Yeah, say more, but
Um, I am, I mean, I think there's something for me about the Shekhinah in your poems that embodies the sense of yearning that we experience, in an intimate, embodied way, right, for the transcendent. Uh, it would be wonderful, actually. Maybe, Joy, would you read a poem, and then our listeners will have an idea of what we're talking about. Oh, but you've
and
gone.
then I want to circle, and then I want to circle back to the question of the way the Shekhinah sort of grows in rabbinic literature and the role in Kabbalah, and you know, the Shekhinah is not exact, doesn't exactly map onto those concepts.
Mm,
So, um, Jill, that the my quest to hear the Shekhinah's voice as a poet led me to realize that I couldn't use my own words for her. And so first I tried to find her voice by mushing up words found from God's monologues in late Isaiah. And they just sounded like mushed up late Isaiah. Um, and then I would say I realized, but actually, once I started embarking on the project, I felt like I kept being given instructions. And this was a definite instruction, but was I think it was is a daft idea. It was not something I was planning to do. But the prompt was to mix the language of Isaiah with language from cosmopolitan magazine articles that in some way resonate with what's in um, Isaiah. And uh,
and completely wild.
yes, completely wild. And I thought insane. And I actually said, well, I think this is not going to work at all, but I will try it with one. And actually, I should read that one
Yeah.
because, yeah, so I thought, all right, I'm going to take, I don't know much of any Torah by heart, but there was a line from late Isaiah that I love. Uh, Sing out, O barren one who is not given birth, which I really related to as a trans woman. And so I went to the Cosmo website and plugged in barren. And the first thing that popped up was an article called Why This Woman is Proud to Be Known as the Pageant Queen Without a Uterus. And I thought, well, wow, okay, so the Shekhinah is known as queen. The Shekhinah doesn't have a uterus. I'd never thought of her as the queen without a uterus, but that's obviously like, she's a queen without a uterus. And I had the uncomfortable experience of seeing Cosmos' website as a site of divine revelation. I thought, I needed proof of concept for this, and I just got it. All right, let's go.
Wow.
So after really years of work, this is the poem that resulted. It's called Singing. Before you were a fetus, before you were an egg, you were a song I was already singing, a promise I'd already kept. I stretch out your curtains, strengthen your pegs, make room inside you for the world I created you to share. You are my embryo, and I am your womb. You're my labor pains, and I am the mother pushing you to cry, to talk, to stand for something, to stop being scared of the joy rising like waters in the days of Noah, flooding your foundations, crowning your head, answering every question I created you to ask. Why you feel incomplete, like a tiara without a pageant. Why you mistake affliction for love, and love, my love, for affliction. Why you just start crying when, for a moment, you hear me singing the secret you forget you're keeping. You are the child of a queen. Why it always feels like the first time to you, the first shaking of your mountains, the first bursting into flame, the very first season of your first reality show, on which a queen with a whirlwind where a uterus should be, whose presence fills you with fear, keeps waiting for you to say, I do, to the love, my love, that never stops singing and follows you everywhere.
So beautiful. Thank you, Joy. The love that never stops singing and follows us everywhere. Such a yearning and hopeful image. And I love the queen with the whirlwind where a uterus should be. Feels like Isaiah must have said that.
Well, whirlwind was not a word that showed up in the Cosmo article, but uterus didn't show up in Isaiah.
Wow. Really, really amazing. And it feels like a kind of liturgy, you know. It feels like I mean, there's something profoundly theological about your poems, Joy. And I wonder if you might say something about what what surprised you in this writing? What crystallized for you? Did your
Mm.
relationship with God change at all because of this writing? And I want to also ask you something about the gender queerness of Shekhinah, but yeah, but something in there. What came out of this experience of writing, channeling these poems for you?
So all of it surprised me. Um, as near as I can tell, which is not very near because I'm not a scholar, um, the Shekhinah emerges because after the temple was destroyed, Jews needed a way to feel close to the presence of God. And there was no longer a place to go where you could count on, oh, my burnt offerings going up. I'm close to the presence of God. There was no automatic way for that to happen. And it was a time of exile and great suffering. And so there was a need to imagine a presence, a divine presence that is not only in the city that the Romans forbade Jews to enter, um, but that could go anywhere. And so it's genius that the rabbis would go back to the verb, which means to dwell, but it's used not for a single dwelling. It's used for this mobile place where the presence accompanies the Israelites. So it's like the perfect and already binary busting combination of it's a place that is not a place, it's a dwelling that is, you know what I mean? It's just wherever you need it to be. And I do think that this was in a far more profound and sophisticated way. But when I was a child, I needed a way to imagine God as being close to me and imagine God as understanding me. And so I conceived of this relationship. And I think the rabbinic idea of the Shekhinah also grew out of theological needs. And as the concept grows, she ramifies in different ways, and I think um, over overflows. But the gendering, I think, comes because binary gender, and it can be a creative thing, as this example shows. Like if you have a binary system and you're associating God's power and transcendence and distance. Like you don't want a God who gets the crap kicked out of them by the Romans, right? We need a God who is transcended. That God gets identified with maleness and masculinity. So if you're going to try to conceive another aspect of divinity, binary gender says, yeah, well, actually, I have a gender option for you right here, which is conveniently, you know, the female is supposed to be the complementary subordinate of maleness. So We know that transcendence is the best. So immanence is the opposite, and it's also good, and we need it. But don't worry, it's not going to rock the divine boat. The male aspect of divinity still gets to be, supreme in the ways we think about the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you see that in the Kabbalistic ideas to some extent also, like gendering God enables us to feel close to God because it enables us to marshal all the relationships in which gender plays a role for us and enables us to feel close to people. We I don't we don't have a depth of culture of having intimate relations to a disembodied being who can't be comprehended. Like there are no cultural human traditions that can help us with that. No words for that have real depth of resonance or physicality or embodiedness. But binary gender is always embodied, always, and it has very, very deep and cross-generational resonances. And so when we think of God in gender terms, we can help create a sense of closeness and relationship by bringing the human meaning of those gender terms. And there's also a trade-off. So when I came to start working on this, and I thought, well, how does Shekhinah speak? Like, how can I do this project? I have no clue how Shekhinah speaks. It's not that I suddenly was hearing Shekhinah speak. Well, the answer immediately came to me any way she wants to. And in tradition, she doesn't get to speak. So there wasn't a model to break away, to either build on or break away from. There was this silence. And that any way she wants to forced me to realize that the whole hierarchy of aspects of divinity thing, like the male aspect of divinity is they're both divine, but the male aspect is more divine. And this was not going to work. I couldn't encounter the Shekhinah as long as I held on to that. You're either a divine being, you're either God or you're not God. You're either divine or you're not divine. And there's no way, there was nothing about being divine that she couldn't participate in. She was more like a relationship with humanity, like the whole gendered thing, the immanence thing. These are ways of like a mode of relationship, divine human relationship, not actually chopping God up into different pieces. And, at the end of days, we'll assemble the jigsaw puzzle that God has become, and Messiah will be there. Shekhinah was not having any of that. She doesn't do pieces, she doesn't do parts. So she has all of the power and the transcendence, but it's all being mobilized. And this is a truly extraordinary thing. In these poems, that's all there, but she's not using it to run the universe or human history. She's using it to do something which she knows is extremely difficult, to establish an intimate relationship with individual human beings. And she knows it's hard because as I looked at tradition, I'm like, yeah, it feels quite right. So, of course, divinity is always there with us. And why would I imagine that my own inner life, not that it's of particular interest to God, but why would I imagine it being something God doesn't know? Right? What's so special about me that I'm impervious to the divine mind and heart? Right? Of course, quote unquote, God is everywhere. But the Shekhinah is not like, I'm everywhere. The Shekhinah is like, I am here right now with you. I have a point of view. And I am talking, and I'm talking all the time. And you usually don't hear me, and you usually don't know I'm there. So, what she wanted to talk about and what she was marshaling her transcendence to do was to try to overcome the divine human binary that says if something is really God, it has to be really far from us. It has to dwarf us. The Shekhinah, as her voice emerged in the poems, and it was always astonishing. The stuff that was not so good was always what I thought she should say. And the stuff that she said was like, really? and sometimes uh-oh, because she is scary, and she that kind of not omnipresence in the abstract sense, but always being there, hearing, knowing all of my thoughts and feelings, like, oh my God, I am not dressed for this relationship. But as you can hear in that poem singing, so she's trying to use her transcendence to undermine time, human time that says there's before and afters. Because if there are befores and afters, there's times when she's with us and times when she isn't with us. There's times when we meet her and times we don't. She's like, yeah, screw that. I experience you all as happening at once, every moment of you, and it never disappears. We're just all here, all together at every moment in your lives. If you want to really get with me, you're going to have to get with that, which means that to hear me, you're going to have to recognize not just how I'm different, that I'm this divinity who knows you actually better than you know yourself, but that at root, we're the same, that you grow out of me, that, I'm your womb and you're my womb. I take a place, and the stuff that I'm experiencing of your life, I can't experience it without your life. You are a place where I have these human experiences, and I am the ground for you to become human. So when you think, well, there's humanity and there's divinity, and they're separate, it's like when you take a strip of paper and it has one side and another side, and they're absolutely different. And then you give it a half twist and connect it, and you have a Mobius strip, and it's all one side. That's what she does to all the binaries.
Hmm.
Her
Hmm.
transcendence, her immanence is a form of transcendence. So there goes that. Her, her nowness is a part of alwaysness.
Hmm.
So we think, oh, well, yeah, this is happening now, but we know that now is fleeting. She's like, actually, stay with me in the nowness, and you're in the alwaysness.
Hmm. Hmm. That's so beautiful. It's connected to the whole notion of Shekhinah, which is dwelling, right? But it's dwelling not as a limited act of I live in this house at this moment, but dwelling as you know a constant, eternal action. It's really powerful what you're saying. And what's so fascinating is at the same time, I hear all kinds of threads from rabbinic and Kabbalistic views of this, of this being, this way of looking at God, and also all the ways that you departed from that. That you didn't allow yourself to be limited by what Jews have said in the past about what this experience of divinity is like.
Ignorance can be a great gift for a poet.
But it
But
doesn't
I'm wondering
it doesn't
what
sound
are,
like it was just I mean, it sounds like you actually knew about some of it and you were like, nope, that's not what's happening.
that's, yes, that is, because even the Kabbalistic idea, which is both sort of offensive, that the Shekhinah is the farthest away you get from Keter in this idea, right? So, but also it's kind of beautiful to imagine divine manifestation right up to the very edge of the reality that we experience. And so always there next to the reality we experience. I have mixed feelings about that. But that maintains the binary that the Shekhinah was just rejecting,
Mm-hmm.
that she isn't either, a vessel for the flow of divine energy that manifests in creation, or stuck in material reality and exile is some of what some rabbinic tradition imagines her. Um, she is the cycling.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I would love to ask you to read another poem. And if there's one in particular that deals with this binary, non-binariness, that would be cool.
Mm.
Or whatever you feel like sharing.
Yeah. Um,
I should have I should have submitted a list of my favorites, but actually I think I prefer the divination in the moment method.
so this is a poem called Likeness, and the passage from Isaiah, it's not actually one of the great poetry passages, but it includes the line, "The Lord was hiding his face." And the Cosmo article is a truly horrifying article called "The Amish Keep to Themselves and They're Hiding a Horrifying Secret About Constant Transgenerational Incest," is what this is, what the secret is. So the Isaiah quote is about this distance, right? When we say God's hiding, when we feel that we can't find God, God's hiding God's face, that reinforces our sense of this divine human binary that makes us feel painfully distant from divinity. And the Amish article is about a lack of boundaries that is horrifying. Um, but I wasn't thinking that. I was just like, it's time to write another poem, and these were the things. Anyway, whatever. Who knew? So, likeness. Like me, you're hidden in skin, in time, pinned like me to a world you endure, in which you hover, holy and ordinary, full of blood and suffering, rejected, forgotten, shoved to one side, mouthed and named in the language of shame, instead of your mother tongue, my tongue, the language of revelation. Like me, you can't escape the world that's inside you, waiting to be healed, to be forgiven, waiting for you to be less like a victim, less like a crime, less like a body grabbed at dust, less like saying nothing, and more like the face you think I'm hiding, more like woods and wings and water, more like conceiving and giving birth, more like overflowing.
Mm. So beautiful. I can't help but listen to it with the ear of the Kabbalists, who think of the Shekhinah in exile. There's something of that in this poem. The exile in the body that is also the homeness in the body, right? But really, really,
He uses that for a kind of relationship jujitsu. He's like, I now I hadn't thought of this before, but this is like the Shekhinah doing her version with us of what I did with God when I was a kid,
mm,
of like, we're so close together because we're both suffering this human existence that we can't, that it profoundly misrepresents us
mm,
and that shoves us to one side. And she's doing it to create intimacy. And then because this is what she does, she flips us so that, well, now that you feel close to me because I'm sharing all of your limitations, now you can really understand that we are both being summoned by the world that's inside us to to be this. And in fact, I'm summoning you to be like my face that you think I'm hiding. You want the face of God in your world? You want to see God's face? Then do what you need to do to see it in the mirror, because that's where I am.
mm, mm, mm. Wow.
And we can't do that by being only ourselves. We have to do it by being the selves that we're given. But she wants us to also be like, I guess this is Kabbalistic also, these vessels through which what overflows us passes.
Mm, mm, mm. I love the phrase "what overflows us." It's like the shefa, right? The divine effulgence. But it also just for me resonates with that feeling of that which wants to emerge from us. The the sense of sort of brimming with something. I really love that. Mm,
She really doesn't want us to feel passive
mm,
in our relationships with divinity. And I think that that is I think that we need many different ways of relating to God, because when we don't have them, they all harden into idolatry. There's no relationship with the divine that human beings can't turn into idolatry. And there's possibly no relationship that we can imagine with divinity, no way we can conceive of divinity that can't foster an authentic relationship. But the Shekhinah feels that what keeps separating us from hearing her is the sense of our own passivity in the face of divinity. And she keeps saying, actually, hello, you're the one who's not listening. I'm here. I'm ready to dance. The power is in your hands.
mm, mm. Wow. Mm. I'm wondering what's been different for you since you wrote this book, if anything. And I'm also really curious. You've now spoken a couple of times in our in our conversation about idolatry, sort of in your desire to avoid this kind of
Mm.
objectification, or sort of this making up, of the of the divine. Or I'm not exactly sure how you would define idolatry, but I have the sense that you're using it in some of those ways. Um, so I'm curious about that. But and I'm also just curious, like, did this book help you avoid that trap that you felt that you had fallen into? And what's been different since you wrote it?
Mm. Well, a step that was missing, and it was only recently that I realized that this might have been what happened, because I thought it was weird that the soul of the stranger. So I've been writing theology, and was not thinking to do more, actually. I'd spent a few years doing it, and I didn't know why this happened. One of my friends, Annie, you know her, she said she didn't really care for the Shekhinah poems, but he said it's like each line is a theology, and that really helped me. I realized, yeah, actually, for the Shekhinah, each line is a different way to conceive the divine human relationship, which is sort of the business end of theology. Thinking about divinity, I think we very quickly get to the point where Maimonides says, well, the wise people, they don't say anything about God because they know that nothing. But the divine human relationship, I think we need to keep thinking and talking about. It grows out of our needs and imagination as much as it grows out of divinity's needs for us and divinity's way of imagining us. And um, but I thought I was done, and I was left with this God who really was incomprehensibility. I glimpsed more than I did before, and I think that gave me a sense of loneliness. Because this was the God who I was supposed to feel. My closeness was based on a feeling of not incomprehensibility. I mean, we were both incomprehensible. That was the way I flattered myself. The two incomprehensible kids in the class hanging out together. But I felt, I think, left behind, you know, in that sense, thinking about God's incomprehensibility, which was right, was not meeting my needs for a way to feel close. And that's when the Shekhinah poems started. So I think but I didn't write them out of that need. I think that she ended up filling a need that I didn't know that I had. Like, I didn't know what that hunger for her voice was. To me, it seemed crazy. Why would I care about this gendered aspect of God, particularly after the soul of the stranger, where all of this ways of thinking about God, I felt like, wow, I'm out the other side of them. Why now come back to this? And so I think for me, the Shekhinah keeps summoning me in very specific ways. Or each poem is, there are things that are in common, but really there's a lot of very specific ways that she's pulling and needling at us and biting us and teasing us and laughing at us. And, there's a, but she's always modeling an incomprehensibility because I don't get her. Her longing for relationship with us and her willingness to wait as long as it takes and to meet us wherever we're able to meet her for a moment. That comes through loud and clear. But I don't know anything about the Shekhinah. Not really. I know she isn't in human time and space, but I also know that she has no trouble localizing or manifesting or saying, remember that moment in your life? Yeah, that was me too. Um, I'm there also. So I don't think I know anything more about her, but what I do think the book showed me is that it's not an either or. Either we have the incomprehensibility of the divine and and that's it. Cuddle up with that on a cold night or come to that when you're heartbroken or mourning. Dance with God's incomprehensibility at your wedding. I think some people can do it. Maimonides seem to be very happy with that, but I'm not at that level. But the Shekhinah keeps saying, I refuse to be less than completely beyond you, but I'm also really here with you whenever you're ready to be here with me. And she keeps herself in different ways, and you could hear that very in both of the poems that I read. In this one, I'm that one. I'm like you in this respect. I'm like you in that respect. And so she keeps moving too quickly for idolatry to say, oh, yes, the Shekhinah as teacher who's sometimes kind or whatever, like that's the Shekhinah. Like she's already on to the next string of things. And she names us in the same way. Mm. In likeness, she keeps naming us in these shifting ways. Remind us that we are not any one of these things either.
Mm. Mm. The word queer is coming to mind. I wonder, do you think about Shekhinah that way? As gender queer or any other kind of queer?
I had thought of God as absolutely queer. I was thinking in the absolute vodka sense. At a certain point, I was very pleased with this. I read a New Yorker article about the person who was hired to do the first advertising campaign for Absolute Vodka. It wasn't called Absolute Vodka, it was just vodka. And the guy was like, well, how can I advertise something which at its best has no taste or smell or color? What is the ad for that? So you go, absolute. And I thought, God is the absolute vodka. You know. So I well, I'm sorry, this is a moment when I've lost the thread. Can you remind me where I started?
I asked you if you thought of God, goddesses, queer.
Right. So in the soul of the strain, realize God is absolutely queer. No human being is more than relatively queer, except for the image of God in which we're created. And that's very abstract. The Shekhinah operationalizes that because she keeps wanting us to recognize in ourselves the moment when one side of the divine human relationship and the Mobius strip turns into the other side. Like the human is the divine is the human. We're going woo, around and around. So when I was thinking about her, though, I wasn't thinking queerness. I was thinking about transpoetics. When I started working on, came out and started writing about trans experience, I thought it takes different techniques to represent ways of being human. That was what I thought of it then, that don't fit inside established categories. You know, if you just see a glimpse of someone's shoe in a movie, you can already, oh, heteronormative female, right? Like you can imagine, you can signal all of these things because these things are highly elaborated categories, but to represent ways of being that don't, which those don't exist, you need techniques. You can invent new words, but that takes a long time for those words to have meaning to me. So mostly what I was doing, what other trans poets were doing was we were creating techniques to take existing language, which was created for heteronormative binary gender, and use it, transform it in ways to represent something else. So I realized I was writing these poems and the Shekhinah was giving me his little lessons in what she was and wasn't. I thought, well, this is where I really need trans poetics, not because the Shekhinah is trans, but because she really doesn't fit into any, even the word Shekhinah, which in some ways is perfect, but it just keeps getting elaborated and changing and growing, right? Um, so I had to say to myself, how does the Shekhinah needed to use trans poetics to represent herself in ways that simultaneously are comprehensible, so enough for us to hear her invitation and recognize her presence and say, oh, this voice. My earliest experience of the Shekhinah, I only recognized in late middle age, where I heard a divine voice and I thought, oh my God, I've heard this voice since childhood. This is the voice. I couldn't tell if it was a voice within me or outside me, but it was a voice that knew me through and through. And it scared me, but it also was a comforting presence. And that I think was an encounter with the Shekhinah, which is not a word or a concept that I had then. When we recognize her it's outside of time. Oh, she's like, whoa, whoa, you were there, you're in all the family photographs. You're in the New York Times from January 3rd, 1886. There's the glimpse of the Shekhinah there in the corner. Like wherever we look, we we see her. Um, to do that in human language and in human syntax that is about befores and afters. We read words sequentially. That really required trans poetics. And I thought, oh, this isn't only about representing ways of being human for which there are no conventions, it's about ways of being for which language has not evolved to represent.
It feels like a whole new level of theology that Maimonides would have had to contend with, it's so powerful to hear you speak about this. So we are just about at time. I'm wondering if you might share one more poem with us. I feel that this is greedy, but I would like one more poem.
Oh, it's not greedy. I'm honored. Well, okay. I want to read one that is that is really queer. There's some poems that feel where these poems feel closer to specific aspects of my own existence, and some feel they're all supposed to be true to me. That was one of the conditions. Whatever she says to anybody else has to be true for me. But some of them come closer to specific things in me rather than more generalized feelings or patterns or habits of being. And this is one of those. And the queerness of it is part of it. So it's called Your Body, and the Isaiah words come from the passage that includes the words, Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Where's the house you will build for me? Where will my resting place be? And the Cosmo article is inside the scam of the purity movement. You keep trying to escape the body I love. the blazing crush of physicality, impurity, and shame, separating you from yourself, from your soul, from me, the body I formed in your mother's womb, delivered, dandled, nursed, and comforted, the body that fails you in so many ways, through which you struggle to materialize, the way tomorrow struggles to materialize through today, blessing through pain, love through the flesh I made, to be a place where you and I can rest, hang out, go crazy for one another, marry, say goodbye, apologize, consume and burn like incense, lead, pledge, proclaim, be held and protected, given and accepted, born and born again. It's me you feel moving inside you, my presence that's so hard to reconcile with your sexual nature and the nature of sex. But sometimes you feel violated, devoured. Tell yourself that you're no good. Imagine me demanding you preach gospels of fire, gospels of bone, gospels of coming to an end. I didn't make you to end. I made you a whirlwind of appetites and offerings I never stopped. Ceremony and sacrifice, wine and reckoning, comedy, coolness, birthing and healing, falling in love, romance, yes, and sex. Your body is a stream from which I drink, a hand I hold, a nipple I lick, a story I tell over and over, a Sabbath I keep for pleasure, a way of being alone, a way of being together, my choir, my throne, my crazy music, my dog-eared paperback.
Ah, so beautiful. My throne, my dog-eared paperback. Wow. Joy, thank you for sharing with us some of your profound human experiences with the divine and some of your labor to bring forth a theology that is big enough, for you and for all of us. It's really a privilege to get to sit with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill. As always, whenever I talk to you, I start looking forward to the next time I get to talk to you.
Well, may it be soon. Thanks again, and thanks everybody for listening.